I've learned quite a lot. I've definitely made a lot of mistakes with work stuff in my life, but I don't let it put me off from keeping on trying and doing new things.
Welcome back to Artfully Crafted. My name is Alienor, and each week I travel to a craftsperson's studio, interview them, and show you their work. This week we're going to Kingston to meet Lora Avedian, who's an embroidery artist. She's done collaborations with the Victoria and Albert Museum, with Christie's, with Smythson, to name but a few of the incredible projects she's worked on. Lora, thank you so much for having us here in your wonderful studio in Kingston. I've been admiring your work online on Instagram and then for a few years now, and I've also had the pleasure to see it sort of in person, sort of dotted around the capital. But it's great to meet you in person and get the opportunity to talk about your work in detail, so thank you.
Yeah.
Shall we get stuck in with, do you want to tell us about your process and some of the materials that you use?
Okay. I guess my process is a lot around drawing. So I start with drawing when I'm out and about on holiday or just kind of going somewhere with my kids. I try and sort of take a lot of photographs. So I've always got my phone out and my husband's always looking at me like, oh, she's just taking a lot of photos. Like, so typical, taking photos of flowers. But that is like, at the moment, that's the easiest way for me to record things. And then I often look back at the photographs I've taken and kind of do little sketches or just on my phone or my iPad or something, just to get ideas. And I'm a bit of a magpie, and I'm like, constantly snapping things, and that's sort of the beginning of a process. And sometimes those things are for the colour or the shape or the pattern or something like that, that I'm photographing things for. And then once I've done some drawing, I sort of connect a lot of different things together. So it's often a little bit of research, sort of a colour combination, and then also looking at the materials that I already have. So like if I was going to start a new collection of cushions or something, I would look at the materials I have, because I try and sort of, I hoard my materials when I find them, because I'm trying to work with dead stock or sort of limited quantity materials, so I'm using up materials that I already have or that are kind of waste material. So that's...
I was going to ask, do you sort of like find material for specific projects, or do you sort of, if you come across something that you like, you're like, oh, I should grab it now whilst I can?
It's usually that, unless I know that I need like a white linen or a specific thing that I don't have, then I will source it. I'm always sort of feeding that material monster.
I like that. So gathering inspiration through photos, but I guess also if you're finding the materials and so you said hoarding them.
Yeah.
So in a way you also get your inspiration from the materials you come across.
Yeah, absolutely. And often when I'm going to markets and things like that, like we live quite close to Kempton Market, so it's a really nice place to go, and Portobello as well. And often just seeing sort of combinations of colours of materials there is really inspiring. And I buy like my ribbons and things from a lot of the market stall holders. So yeah.
How do you then go from, okay, I have materials that I like and that I'm happy with, and I have drawings, based on photos that I've taken. How does that then go to the next step?
I guess in relation to commissions, often people look at my work and say, I like that, can you do this for me on this kind of thing? Like I'm doing a headboard at the moment, which is one of my pieces from university, and they just really love it and they want that as a headboard.
Right.
And they've chosen the background fabric, and then I just kind of
kind of adapting existing work to a new brief.
So I haven't had loads of time to do sampling recently, but that's like really important for me to do, make new things and do sampling and things, so that I can show people.
Put them out, and then that might spark a new conversation. You touched upon commissions a little bit. Is there anything that you've been working on that you want to share?
I am working on some curtains for a commission for Greco Deco, who's an interior designer, and that's like I'm doing curtains and a chair for them. In fact, 2 chairs. Maybe
if you could talk about if someone was watching this video and they are considering a commission from you, what would you say would be useful things for them to know before you sort of enter that process, before they reach out to you, like any limitations or things that would be helpful in them forming ideas, and then B, what would that process look like once they've made contact with you?
I do really like to work with natural materials, and I'm trying to lower my impact on the environment. So that's like a big thing for me personally. But then actually limitations on where my work can go is there's not really any for me. Like I'd love to see more big curtains. I'd love to see I'd love to do bigger pieces.
Right.
And I love working on a larger scale, and I think people see my work, or people often see embroidery as being a very small thing, and I like seeing on a larger scale.
Well, I guess also, especially if they're looking at your samples, I think sometimes it's hard for people to project onto what it might or what it could look like if it was done on a really big. And also sometimes to imagine, okay, would this scale of work translate well onto a much larger surface. So that might be why, but hopefully with some of the projects that you've sort of been working on, you can sort of, the more work you have to show of that scale, then hopefully the more it encourages.
Yeah, absolutely. This commission that I'm doing at the moment isn't kind of it's not my style of working, but it's been really interesting seeing how I can translate my work into curtains, and like what you can really do with embroidery. It can go anywhere really, and
that pushes you as an artist, right? Because then you're having to adapt your working style to something else.
Yeah, absolutely. I love trying to work out what it is that, especially for interior designers and commissions, I love trying to work out what it is that people really can see and want, and I think that goes back to working as a set designer and prop making and things, and trying to translate people's ideas, because it often wasn't my idea, it's someone else's idea, into reality.
You talked about curtains and my mind went to like sort of borders, and then flowers. It sort of like, it feels like a natural extension, and obviously the borders could end up being quite different. Like they might be more sort of repeats that are geometric, etc. Like they might not necessarily be floral, but would go with floral.
I am working on a collection of leading edges for curtains, because that's actually been the most popular thing recently that people have asked me to do. So it's that and cafe curtains are the two things that I've been asked to do more recently. And I like the idea of doing some leading edges that are maybe more geometric or inspired by other things apart from floral. But I also, every time I think of them, I think of like things climbing, like, and climbing flowers and roses and plants that have birds sitting on them, and like all sorts of those are the things that come up in my mind. Like I'm a very visual person, I suppose, and things just But also, I guess I am really inspired. I've always been quite inspired by like metalwork, and on my wall there's some drawings from some metalwork I saw when I was in Norway recently. And
Does that tie in with what you're working on for Christmas? Christmas ornaments. Am I right
no,
in thinking
it
that?
isn't.
Oh,
but
sorry.
It doesn't, but maybe it should. No, the Christmas ornaments are made out of metal, but they're not in the same way like a wire.
Oh, I
Like,
see.
It's more like the stuff that you'd see at the V&A.
Yes.
There's like a metalwork or ironwork, is it? A section that I always love going to, because I feel like it just translates perfectly into textiles. That kind of weaving of materials, even though they're very different weight materials.
So do you find quite a lot of inspiration from the V&A collection? Is that something that you use a lot?
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. And that was why actually doing some work for the V&A, when I did the collaboration with them, that was just a dream come true. I did a scarf collection for them of just one scarf design, but it was working with, it had to all be kind of made in the UK, and so I worked with a weaver that I'd met at university, and he wove all of the pieces, wove is the word, in Scotland, and all of the wool was from Ireland, and those, we made 30 of those, and I did embroidery on each one of them.
That's
so
amazing.
yeah, that was but that was inspired by one of the pieces from the V&A by William Morris's daughter.
May Morris?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a painting by her.
Yeah.
And actually that was commissioned.
She did some great embroideries.
Yeah.
I mean, her work is incredible, I think.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Underrated.
She spends so much of her life sort of promoting her father's work, but actually she was an incredible artist.
Yeah, actually that was kind of the reasoning behind, because I couldn't go into the V&A because it was lockdown, COVID times, and which was so sad for me because I absolutely love it there. But they have a huge online catalogue.
They do.
So they said, go on there, have a look, see what you can find. And I found this painting. There was like a huge selection of things that I found that I thought, oh, I could do something from any of these things. But the person who I was working with in the shop suggested using May Morris because of the highlighting of a woman in craft, and it kind of goes with my philosophy as well of just,
and also the design ethos. I can see how that would feel quite connected actually to what you're doing as well. So that's a beautiful collaboration there. We've been talking about your process, and along the way you sort of touch upon being a set designer. Do you want to talk about maybe how you got to where you are, you know, sort of highlights of your journey that have sort of shaped you as an artist?
Yeah. So I did my BA in embroidery at Manchester Met, which is a course that doesn't exist anymore, and I think it's just been put together with the general textiles, but it was like specifically embroidery. And I found out about that because I went to sixth form college with the daughter of Karen Nicol, who's like an embroidery designer whose work I love. And she really inspired me to get into embroidery.
Right.
And then, so I spent like some summers in her studio helping her, and that really sort of cemented my love of embroidery. And she works in a very broad way with embroidery and very mixed media, so that I found really interesting as well, because I've always just been interested in art and design and anything. One of my mum's friends was a prop maker, art department person for theatres, so spent a lot of time in theatre, like the Polka Theatre in Wimbledon when I was a kid, and my mum used to work there as well.
Is your mum a creative?
She She is really creative and she loves textiles, but she's more of a printmaker. She does weaving now. But
so the apple doesn't fall far from a tree.
Yeah, no, it really doesn't. And she would take me to all the exhibitions and, you know, encourage me to get on the machine and try embroidery. It's like slowly drip feeding into what I do now, I suppose. And when I was doing my BA, I was sort of creating objects and worlds that would come from this kind of narrative. And I was very inspired by Tim Walker and Shona Heath, and bought the book, and like I was just obsessed with it. So, and creating these kind of worlds and the colour palettes and the materials, and yeah, that was a big influence on me. And after I left Manchester, I ended up working for JW Anderson for a season as an intern. But he asked me to like head up the whole of the embroidery department. So that was like kind of very much thrown into the fashion industry, and I realised that it wasn't really for me. Or I just wanted to try something different. And ended up assisting set designers and prop making and things like that for about 6 or 7 years. And loved it. And but it was very hard work. And we threw away everything at the end of the day or tried to recycle things, but it was never quite satisfying enough for me. I wasn't really able to make things that I wanted to make things that people would keep. So I wasn't able to do that with those photo shoots. So, but I really enjoyed making those kind of worlds and using different materials and putting together colour palettes.
So creatively was fulfilling, but in terms of aligning with your values, there was just something where you felt like you wanted to do something that would have a longer lifespan, I guess.
I also just loved embroidery and was doing embroidery on the side in my studio and like desperately trying to just work out what it was I wanted to do with that. And then I ended up doing my master's at the Royal College of Art, and that kind of was a bit of a career change.
A sort of reset. I'm sort of thinking, you know, it's that period of time, because I also had, you know, did a BA and then worked and then sort of later did an MA, and I think that period of exploration actually is quite good, because I think, I mean, I'm obviously biased because that is my path to have taken a break and then done an MA later, but I sort of do think it helps you sort of work things out, try different things.
Definitely.
And settle into yourself as a more, you know, whether you're a more mature person, but also more mature as an artist.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then sort of when you come back to the MA, you have more focus, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I was one of the older people on the MA, and I was quite determined. And it felt like, hey, maybe what I'm thinking about, maybe not being like a fine crafts person, like really like a wood turner, you know, those heritage craft. Although I am sort of in the craft world, maybe working in a slightly different way, or working in the interiors world in a slightly different way.
Well, I think you've basically carved your own identity. You're sort of adjacent to all of these things, and you have a foot in with all of these things, but you've very much carved your own niche, haven't you? Yeah.
And actually I really loved, during my BA and my foundation, I really loved illustration. I know that sounds like so many different things, but had a lot of friends who were illustrators and graphic designers, and I just found it really interesting. I don't know.
I can see how that would feed into your work though, because you've got quite strong lines, outlines, and then that's what, I mean, I could be wrong, but that's what I sort of associate with illustration, graphic design, is just that, something quite strong in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think when I look back at so many years of making things and doing lots of different things, I do feel like they've all had their part to play.
You had before we got on camera, you talked about a project with the Barbican that you said really sums up well that transition from set designer to becoming, you know, your own. Can I say your own person as an artist?
Yeah. So when I finished my MA, I was asked by the Barbican Centre, the shop of the Barbican Centre, to do a residency there. It was around Christmas time that I was doing the residency, and they asked me to do decorations for the whole centre, or in front of the... So it ended up being above the shop and in the atrium. So that was quite exciting because it meant that I got to kind of develop all of these ideas and put them into more three-dimensional spaces as well. And it was kind of a full circle moment for me because I ended up working with some of the set builders who I had assisted when I was just starting out, like prop making company. And I was telling them what to do, which was quite nice.
So it's come full circle, kind of
it really
thing.
did. So it was kind of melding everything together, and that was quite a massive...
So a synthesis of everything that you've done today, basically.
Yeah. Although I think I would do it differently now, but it was kind of a point where I was kind of growing as a designer and maker, and I still didn't 100% know where I was going with it. And it was actually probably a good time to have done that because I was like very open to just making things that look nice and that worked for the space. And that's where I first made my Christmas decorations, which I've got more new ones now for sale this year. But that was also a real learning curve on kind of working with a shop and doing wholesale and things like that, which I learned quite a lot.
Actually, that's the perfect sort of way to dive into, you know, stockists and, you know, that kind of world, and just generally setting up a business. I mean, there's a lot to cover there. How did you, you know, make that jump and things that you've learned along the way?
I still feel like I'm making the jump right now, because a lot of the work that I've done over the last 5 years has been commission based, and I've just kind of started doing more products, so the decorations, and also this year I launched a tableware, like table linens collection. Part of it has been launched at a shop in Amsterdam.
So off camera we were talking about your website, and in preparation for this interview I'd been reading it, and you said to me, oh, I wrote this myself, but now I'm going to get someone else to write it. And I think that's interesting because, you know, in the early stages you're sort of having to do everything yourself because you might not have the cash flow, right?
I didn't even know there were people who would do a bio for you, like that it even existed, that thing, because obviously you know your work really well, and surely you should be the one to write it yourself, but actually it's so helpful to have someone with an outside perspective to look at your work and say what they see you as and what they see you doing, and trying to explain that actually to someone, because I had a chat with the person who's doing it for me, and trying to explain yourself is really hard and makes you see yourself and step away from what you're doing a little bit, and maybe understand your practice and your work a bit more. Actually doing everything has been so difficult, and trying to explain why my reasonings for doing what I'm doing is also so hard, and I feel like I'm an imposter a lot of the time. Like,
I think we all feel that way.
Why am I saying this? I don't know.
Hey, I mean, I feel like a total imposter starting this channel because I've never, you know, before doing this, I'd never been in, you know, I've never had anything to do with a camera, really. And then all of a sudden here I am being like, oh, I can do this. Can I?
I think so. I think you're okay.
But it's, and I think what's really interesting as well is that, you know, you talk about having to explain what you do to someone else, and they might bring clarity to it in a way that you can't because you're too close to it.
Sort of going from being like an artist and a maker to a business person is such a difficult transition, and my brain is not really made for it, but I do feel I've definitely made some mistakes, and pricing things is so difficult, and but I do feel like once you have the right people around you, like I've got someone to help me a bit with press this year, which I have only done previously last year, like on one project. So it's like a new thing for me, but actually having people who really know what they're doing is so helpful.
Because it will take them 5 minutes what could take you hours, because you'll have to like read up on it from scratch. And then think about, you know, and I think especially for magazines, for example, you know, someone would look at your work or at a specific project, and if they know the magazine world, they might, you know, a really good PR person will know right away what magazine they need to pitch to, and what, you know, who at that magazine would really connect with your work. Whereas for you, it might be like, oh my God, it's like there's all these magazines.
Who
and
do you email?
Might not know like the schedule, like what sort of things they're working on at the moment for long term.
That is
then
one
who
thing.
to email, etc. With, you know, someone who literally that is their job. They'll know all of these things, and they'll take them,
exactly,
you know, one brainstorm session, and they're like, oh, okay, I know exactly what we need to do next. And that's quite refreshing sometimes. And
takes the pressure off, definitely.
It takes the pressure off, but I think it also comes from sometimes people don't value their own time that much, and so they're like, oh, but I could work it out myself if I just put my mind to it. And it's like, yeah, you definitely can, but I think it's choosing, you know, you can't possibly become an expert at everything in life.
No.
So if you're going to choose just a couple of things, you know, and maybe like hire someone else for the other things, that they're going to be super efficient at it, and then it means you can, you know, partner with them. It's quite liberating to accept that sometimes.
Is, absolutely. And I've realised that actually I need help with my business if it's going to be successful. I need help with it. I need people who know what they're doing. I always do my own accounts. I think I need an accountant, things like that. And I finally but only really recently have I got to a point where I feel like I'm able to do that. Like at some point I'd really love to get a business mentor and things like that. But I'm loads of things on my plate, as I think you noticed.
You're definitely busy, keeping very busy, and you know, you do have so many projects, which is exciting, but I can imagine at times must also be overwhelming. And I think there's always that anxiety as a creative of like, you know, worrying that work is going to dry up, and not wanting to say no to things,
freelance
etc.
mentality. That's what I
is that like scarcity mindset, but then at the same time you end up doing so much and then stressing yourself out, and actually as a creative you need that time to play. And
absolutely,
how do you balance that actually, or are you still?
Good question. Well, I'm definitely getting better at balancing it and not getting too scared about not having money coming in. I guess as I've got a bit older, and now I have a husband who's like taking a bit of that stress away, it's definitely helped. But I think it's always in the back of my mind, like, oh, I should be working, I should be doing something, I should be finding another opportunity. Apart from the fact that I'm very ambitious and also a massive workaholic, so it's trying to balance that. And I was thinking this morning, I need to spend a bit of time doing some drawing or something that's not making stuff for other people for a bit, because I think it's been a lot of working for other people this year. And I've definitely learned with time that it's okay to say no. And you don't have to do every project that comes into your inbox. And I'm definitely more okay with that than I was. But I think I still trip up and think things are going to be a good idea. I've learned quite a lot. I've definitely made a lot of mistakes with work stuff in my life, but I'm I don't let it put me off from keeping on trying and doing new things. And I also really, for some reason, love to put myself in difficult situations. Maybe not difficult.
As in like growth situations,
yeah, growth
right?
situations. I love it. Like for some reason, I just love a challenge. So if someone's like, "Can you paint the front of my shop?" I'm like, "Sure, I'll try it." Like, why not? I haven't done that before, but I'll do it.
But I think that's good, and I think again it's connecting with your gut on. Does it feel like a good nervous or a bad nervous?
Yeah,
and
like
I think we can all tell the difference, right? But it's sometimes, and I think especially when we're stressed or tired and have too much on our plates and we're juggling too many things, that's when like your instincts can get a little bit muddled, and it gets harder to sort of connect with. Does it feel like a good challenge or a bad challenge? You've talked about having learned a lot since you started on this journey. If you were to give advice to maybe yourself when you finish your MA, and perhaps people who are at the start of that journey of who've done some exploration, they sort of think they know now what they want to focus on. Maybe they've done an MA or they're sort of ready to launch. What advice would you give them then?
I guess I don't know if this is good advice or bad advice, but I would say say yes to things, and also tell people, at least for like the first year, I don't know, and tell people what you do. That's another thing. I think people are not, and like show people your work. I think people are afraid that they'll be copied, or I don't know, that people are going to take their ideas. Because, I mean, that does happen a lot these days, but it doesn't happen as much as I think people think. And the creative world is pretty, kind. And I think the community on Instagram has been amazing for me. Sharing stuff on Instagram has been hugely helpful for feedback, and also just to make friends and make acquaintances and get commissions. And I think if you don't show people what you're doing or talk to people about it, then they won't know you exist.
Okay, so showing one's work, creating community and being on Instagram, saying yes in the first year. Yeah.
I think also I had a studio space. My friend Lora and I had this tiny studio space. It was literally the size of my desk and like a tiny bit of storage next to me. But we made so many friends, and we did exhibitions together, and like just I think talking to people and making friends is like, people call it networking, but I actually think it's, to a certain extent, yes, networking is going to events and meeting people, but I think you just got to make friends.
Yeah, I mean, it's making friends, making connections, networking. Exactly. It's all the same thing. I think networking has just a negative connotation that it's like, it has that like, I'm interested, I want something, but it all kind of, and especially in the creative world, you're naturally, the people that you sort of gravitate towards because they're fellow creatives and they're like, energy is that exchange of energy and ideas. They're also the people that you're going to end up wanting to collaborate with professionally, and they're the people who might hear about a great studio place or who might introduce you to a gallery, or whatever it is. And so that does form your network, and it's incredibly important. Yeah,
I've been really lucky with those people that I met at the Heart Space, and I'm still friends with them. And having that kind of network around you, moving into a studio space where you don't know anyone and you have to meet people is probably, if you don't have a creative network, it's probably one of the best ways to do that. If you can and are able to afford it, then it's worth it. Even if it's just a desk space. Like to have somewhere to go and also mentally feel like you're going to work. That's another thing. And so you take yourself really seriously. And that took me a while to work out, that I wasn't really taking myself super seriously as a textile designer or designer for a while.
You've also been involved with QEST. Do you want to say a little bit about QEST? And
they're a really good community as well. If you're lucky enough to get a a scholarship from them. I applied for my scholarship with them to do my MA, my second year of my MA.
Okay.
So they paid for that for me, which was
They
incredible.
paid the fees?
Yes, for the second year.
That's awesome.
Absolutely amazing. And it was I was told that it was really difficult to get the scholarship, so I was like really amazed that I got the interview. And then I think when I applied...
I do actually know some people who like applied like 3-4 times before they got it.
Yeah.
So I think it's like, you never know quite who else they've got applying for it that year, etc. I think it's worth like, you know, not giving up. Like it's worth asking for feedback and applying again.
Definitely. And I have, not that I'm advertising to help everyone who's applying, but I have helped some people, just looked over their applications in the past, and just finding someone... I had some really great help with my application, like, because I'm really dyslexic and I find it really difficult to write. So I had a friend, I wrote my application, but then my friend helped me go through it and edit it just to streamline it, because a lot of the way I write is very waffly. And I've learned over time that I have to edit very much, slim things down, but it's very difficult to do that. And
I think that's why a lot of organisations are also looking at whether they can get video submissions and things like that to give other formats as an option to people.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, because I think you don't want things like that to be a barrier to entry.
The thing about QEST is that you're showing your craft and your talent, and often I think they would overlook a badly written proposal for really incredible work. So I think it's a balance of the two. One thing that I learned when I was on my MA is talking in front of people and having a bit more confidence to tell people about my work and not completely lose my trail of thought, which is what I used to get, and I get so angry and like stressed out about not being able to speak.
And that's another thing as well, is like you're having to be, I think whenever you apply for something, you're essentially having to like big yourself up in a way that can sometimes be really uncomfortable. And then again, it's, you know, a lot of creatives find that the best way they have of expressing themselves is through their work. So again, having to verbalize things feels like not the most natural thing. Yeah,
I think part of it is you need to be a bit of a character for people to latch on to that, and like, I don't know.
If there's like a likability almost, would you say?
Yeah, but then, like I said, I think a lot of it is down to the quality of your work, and they can see through anything, really.
They can.
But I do a lot of talking to students now, because I'm teaching at London College of Fashion. I'm an associate lecturer, so not full-time at all, but it's every time I do it, I'm nervous, but it's like good nerves, like I was saying. Like, I like to put myself in situations where I'm a bit like... And the scholarship I was terrified about that, but I like really practiced, and
I love
you only
that.
have to do it once, and then hopefully you'll get it. And
but then, you know, it's one of these things where actually, you know, then the next time you encounter something like that, then you'll have it at the back of your mind. You'll be like, well, I did it before.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
You know, even if the outcome hadn't been successful, you would have been like, well, what's the worst that happened? Okay, I wasn't successful, but it's not like I had the whole world laughing at me, which I think is often like when we get into our own heads, we're like, oh my God, I'm going to like embarrass myself because someone will read this or see this or whatever. Like, you know, I'm thinking for me with this, I'm like, I'm going to put myself on camera, and some people are not going to like my voice, or they're not going to think I have enough experience.
Always be critics.
And you sort of have to, you know, anything that you've done before sort of acts as like a sort of encouragement where you sort of think, well, I've put myself out of my comfort zone before and it wasn't that bad, so I can do it again.
Absolutely. Yeah, I should apply for more things, actually. I feel like I forget about applying for things, but it was such a good lesson for me. and it was a confidence boost, definitely.
Yeah. Well, you just mentioned briefly teaching. You also do workshops. Am I right in thinking you've done some in France? That means you want to say a little bit more about that part of your practice and...
Yeah, workshops are really fun and just a really nice way of connecting with people, and the people that I meet on them is just, they're all just lovely. And I do workshops in all over the place. I've done them at the Royal Academy of the Arts, I've done them in France, like I did this year, at a house called
Clos Mirabel.
Yeah, you're pronouncing it nicely. I would have said Clos, which is completely wrong. And
I do have home advantage on
that
one.
Yes, you do. That's a really nice family-run place. And that was, this year was the first year I did this week-long workshop there, teaching kind of experimental embroidery, I call it, because it's like I was saying earlier, it's like large. I like working on kind of larger scale than you'd expect, and so I often teach students how to kind of embrace slightly larger scale embroideries and usually floral stuff.
That's all very on brand. So
yeah,
that's
exactly.
Great.
But yeah, I think people are a bit surprised. I usually give them the skills and then and the techniques, and provide a lot of materials, and ask them to kind of try and do their own thing, sort of set them free with all of that information.
Yeah.
So sometimes I guide people into how they can do specific designs, but I usually try and let people experiment, because I find often when you do embroidery classes or workshops, it's very prescribed, which is fine. Like, knowing that you're going to achieve this one thing in the 2 hours that you're there is great, and I think it works for so many people, and sometimes I do that, but
I guess a bit of a confidence building thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think when you're on a longer course, you have that room to
explore,
just like try stuff out.
I find that often people put themselves in a box of, oh, I'm not creative, I'm this. And then actually what I've found with creativity is that the more you surround yourself with creativity, the more creative you become. And I think that whole idea that like you either have innate talent or you don't, that just doesn't work.
No.
Anytime I talk with anyone who, you know, has drawing as part of their practice, or anything else creative for that matter, I'm just saying, well, it just takes practice. You know, you don't start off being able to do something really elaborate. You start off small and you just keep at it, even if it's just a little bit. It's like creativity begets creativity, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think some people come to my classes, especially the week-long ones. If Maggie is listening to this, she will know that some people come to the class and say they can't draw. Like one of my students on the week-long class said adamantly couldn't draw. And I don't think that's true necessarily. And I try and encourage people to just have a go. And actually, when you're translating a drawing into stitch, it can be so forgiving, especially with the technique that I use. Which is a lot of couching, which is like what my book is all about, and using different materials. I just think I think people are often surprised at how nice it can look when they just
trust the process.
Yeah, and don't expect too much.
So another thing that you mentioned to me that you've got coming up is a project in Armenia.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? And I think that's quite a personal one as well.
Yeah, so I've been invited by a company called TUMO, and they do to do a workshop for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 4 weeks in Armenia, which I'm half Armenian, so it's quite exciting for me because I've never been to Armenia. I was actually meant to do it this year, but I ended up having too much work to do.
Fine.
And so we're doing it next year in October, I think, next year. And I'll essentially be teaching a group of students who are between the age of, I think, 19 or 18 and 30. And they're people who have either just finished uni or are about to start. And it's trying to kind of encourage new skills and develop a portfolio for those people.
Thinking about the future of crafts in this country, like what opportunities would you like to see more of, and things that you think would help foster creativity and help people, you know, because it is a lot of, you know, when you look at your path up to now, it's a lot of exploration, but also learning and, you know, and you've also had the opportunity of like having funding to get to where you are. So, you know, what do you think?
There are so many things. I guess affordable studio spaces and more of them would be amazing. Even I've struggled to find a good studio space that I can afford. And I can now afford a fairly decent one. But back when I was starting, I really couldn't. And having the Heart space was great because the cost was low. I mean, the space was small, but it was a start. I guess also having more vocational courses that are more accepted as proper courses, because I think there's a lot of people I've met who were like at school in the 80s or at university in the 80s, and they did only vocational kind of BAs. So like in costume or, I mean, it was all very practical. So I feel like a lot of the creative courses are now, not that writing is a bad thing, but there's a lot of writing, and I think that's really hard, and they're long.
You do find, you know, introductory courses, short courses, etc. But then these are very expensive often. And so then it means, you know, as you do hear a lot of people who, as you say, did like foundations and things like that, you know, previous generations where like it was free for them.
Exactly.
And so they had that space where they could explore lots of different things.
And the low pressure, because you're not like, oh, this is going to cost me loads of money, so I have to make the most out of it. Or it has to be the thing that I do. And I think it's so unhelpful when you don't really know what you're doing, especially like, people I know who are Scandinavian, they've done a couple of degrees and maybe started them later in their life and done a bit of working first. And I do think work experience is also a very undervalued thing in school. And I did so much work experience and assisting people, and I was lucky that I had the contacts in my mum's friend and school friends' parents who were able to give me a bit of experience. But
and I was going to say, actually, it's, you know, the cost of living also doesn't help, particularly in cities, because I feel like, you know, you talked earlier about how the V&A is a really helpful source of inspiration, and there's also a lot of the courses and a lot of the networking, etc. That all happens in cities that are very expensive. And so then you feel like you need to be there at the start of your career, especially to like make these connections, establish yourself, learn and do all of these things. But then you've got a really high cost of living. And it's just just an added level of barrier to entry.
Absolutely. When I was doing my MA, I couldn't afford to live in a flat, or I couldn't afford to rent a place, and so I had to move home. And I was like 27, and it was so not what I wanted to be doing at the time. It would be nice if there was a bit more funding from the government, but also I think vocational courses, like for example, there was a course at Hampton Court School of
Royal School of Needlework.
Right. And I think they weren't able to get funding for. People weren't able to get funding to do the vocational course that they did because it wasn't part of the university system. So like they now have a BA, which is amazing, but they've had to turn it into a BA
It's
in
a
it,
3-year
able
thing.
to. I mean, maybe someone will email you and say that's wrong, but I think that's the case from what I've heard, and yeah, that's just an example of these kind of craft education that you could get, but it's inaccessible unless you're.
I do find it weird that everything has to be turned into a degree to be something that can be funded. It's just, it's an added layer of just.
Actually, something great about QEST is that they have, they give money for not just scholarships for education, but for people to do apprenticeships.
Yeah.
So things like that.
Apprenticeship and shorter courses as well, like if it feeds into your practice and that sort of thing. Yeah, that is true.
So things, people like them, they're invaluable, really, and but there's not many.
Enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not many people.
If everyone watching this can donate to QEST.
I think it's not terrible in the UK, but it could be better.
It could be better, yeah. I think it's especially when we compare to, France, Italy, etc.
Yeah.
And you say the Nordic states where things are just, there's a different landscape there.
Absolutely.
One final thing, talking about writing, your book. I think that's something that we haven't mentioned. That's obviously, what was that process like?
So I did that over lockdown, which was nuts. And it was great because it gave me a real focus, and that's all I did basically over lockdown, that and like a few commissions. I was really lucky to get some really nice commissions, but that was my main focus. And writing a book was very hard, but it also gave me a really good opportunity to examine my process and why I was doing things, and maybe understand the embroidery a bit more. Yeah. And it has also really informed my teaching. So helped me
structure your ideas.
Yeah, and just help me work out how to explain to people how to do things. And it also was a really nice, because I did all the photo shoots and styled all the photos and got all the props, and it was like, I did a lot, and I really should have got someone to help me.
I feel like that's a theme that's come up a lot. You're just like, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to do it all.
Yeah, I guess I'm just used to
Wonder
doing
Woman.
everything. And I really like doing a lot of different things. Like I've always had my fingers in lots of pies, and I guess I have quite a clear vision of things, and often I just want to do it myself because it's fun.
No, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for delving in. I think we've covered a lot of topics, and hopefully there'll be something in there for everyone, whether at the start of their own career, or whether have been considering commissioning you for something for a while, or maybe institutions looking at partnering with you for special projects. So it's been really great.
Thank you.
Please do sign up to Lora's newsletter if you'd like to be kept in the loop. Just in the few weeks since we filmed, she had a really successful exhibition of her work at the Sanderson headquarters, took part in a market at Museum of the Home, and she's got much more coming up next year, including another week-long workshop at Clos Mirabel. Thank you for watching. It means a lot, especially as at this moment the channel is entirely self-funded. So please spread the word and subscribe. See you next week.
Oh my God, my mind's just gone blank. Oh.
Maybe I heard your stomach rumble.
My God, my stomach's been rumbling so much.
Did you hear our stomachs rumbled?
That is going to be on there.